The billionaire said he would never have children. She left pregnant and came back with twins. Some rules are carved in stone, until life proves them wrong. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Logan Whitaker's penthouse office, casting sharp shadows across the mahogany desk where billion-dollar decisions were made daily. At 38, Logan had built an empire that stretched across 3 continents, but this Tuesday felt different, heavy, like the calm before a storm he couldn't predict. His fingers drummed against the leather armrest of his chair as he stared at the contract in front of him. A merger worth $800 million. Numbers that would make most people dizzy. For Logan, they were just another Tuesday. Mr. Whitaker, his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Ms. Carter is here for the legal review. Logan's chest tightened imperceptibly. Savannah Carter. 3 years of working together. 3 years of stolen glances across conference rooms. 3 years of pretending that what happened behind closed doors was just convenient. Send her in. The door opened, and Savannah walked in with that confident stride that had first caught his attention. Blonde hair pulled back in a professional bun, green eyes sharp as glass, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She was everything Logan respected in a business partner. Brilliant, ruthless when necessary, and completely unreadable. "Good morning, Logan." Her voice was steady, professional. No hint of the woman who had whispered his name in the darkness just hours ago. "Savannah." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "The Morrison acquisition needs your magic touch." She sat down, crossing her legs with practiced elegance. "Magic touch? I prefer to call it competence." A ghost of a smile tugged at Logan's lips. This was their dance. Sharp words hiding softer truths. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents, her movements precise and controlled. "I've reviewed the preliminary contracts," she said, sliding the papers across his desk. "There are 17 potential legal vulnerabilities that could cost you millions if Morrison decides to play dirty." Logan leaned back in his chair, studying her face. "And your recommendation? Restructure the payment terms, add a penalty clause for non-disclosure violations, and..." She paused, her green eyes meeting his. "Trust your instincts. You didn't build this empire by being careless." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them crackled with unspoken words, with memories of tangled sheets and whispered confessions that disappeared with the sunrise. "Logan?" Savannah's voice was softer now, almost vulnerable. "Can I ask you something?" He tensed. In 3 years, she had never asked him anything personal during business hours. Their relationship, if he could even call it that, existed in the shadows between professional obligations and stolen moments. "What do you want to know?" She set down her pen and looked at him directly. No longer the composed corporate lawyer, but the woman who had seen him at his most vulnerable. "Do you ever think about the future? Not business futures. Your future. Personal future." The question hit him like a physical blow. Logan's jaw tightened, and the familiar walls he had built around his heart slammed shut. "You know better than to ask me that." "Do I?" Savannah's voice was barely above a whisper. "Because sometimes when you look at me, I think..." "You think what?" His voice was sharp now, defensive. She stood up abruptly, gathering her papers with shaking hands. "Nothing. I think nothing." But Logan saw the truth in her eyes, the truth he had been running from for 3 years. She was falling in love with him. Maybe she already had, and that terrified him more than any financial crisis ever could. "Savannah." Her name came out rougher than he intended. She stopped at the door, her back to him. "Yes? We both know what this is. What we are." The words felt like glass in his throat. "Don't make it more complicated than it needs to be." Her shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. "Of course. How foolish of me to think..." "Think what?" She turned around, and for the first time in 3 years, Logan saw tears threatening in her green eyes. "To think that maybe you could love someone the way they deserve to be loved." The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Logan wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. He had built his entire life around avoiding this moment, this terrifying possibility of letting someone in completely. "I'll have the revised contracts on your desk by tomorrow," Savannah said, her professional mask sliding back into place. As the door closed behind her, Logan stared at the empty chair where she had been sitting. His hands were trembling slightly, something that never happened during business negotiations, hostile takeovers, or million-dollar gambles. But Savannah Carter wasn't a business deal. She was the one thing Logan Whitaker couldn't control, couldn't predict, and couldn't afford to lose. And that realization terrified him more than anything he had ever faced, because Logan Whitaker had one rule that governed everything he did, everything he was: never let anyone close enough to destroy you. But what happened when that someone was already inside? The hardest conversations happen in the quietest moments. Logan's penthouse apartment felt suffocating that evening, despite its 3,000 square feet of carefully curated luxury. He stood by the massive windows overlooking Boston's glittering skyline, a glass of aged whiskey untouched in his hand. The city lights blurred together like distant stars, but all he could see was Savannah's face, the way her mask had slipped for just a moment, revealing the pain he had been pretending not to notice. The elevator chimed softly, and he didn't need to turn around to know she had arrived. Savannah had her own key, her own code, privileges he had never given anyone else, though he told himself it was purely for convenience. "You're brooding," her voice came from behind him, gentle but tired. "I don't brood." Logan took a sip of his whiskey, the burn doing nothing to ease the tightness in his chest. "I strategize." Her heels clicked softly against the marble floor as she approached. In his peripheral vision, he could see her reflection in the window. She had changed from her business suit into a simple black dress, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders. Beautiful, vulnerable, everything he couldn't allow himself to want. "Is that what you call what happened in your office today? Strategy?" Logan finally turned to face her. Savannah stood just close enough that he could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive that he had unconsciously memorized. Her green eyes were guarded now, but he could see the hurt simmering beneath the surface. "What do you want me to say, Savannah?" "The truth." Her voice was steady, but her hands were clasped tightly in front of her. "For once, just tell me the truth." "The truth?" Logan laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The truth is that this, whatever this is between us, it has an expiration date. It always has." Something flickered across her face. "Because you don't do relationships. Because I don't do forever." The words came out harsher than he intended. "I don't do happily ever after, Savannah. I don't do Sunday mornings and family dinners and children." The word hung between them like a blade. Logan's jaw tightened. "Especially not children." Savannah moved to the couch, sinking into the soft leather with a sigh that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her soul. "You know, I used to think it was because of your work. All those deals, all those responsibilities. It's not about work." "Then what is it about?" She looked up at him, and Logan saw something in her eyes that made his chest constrict. Hope. Desperate, foolish hope. "Because 3 years, Logan. 3 years of this dance we've been doing. 3 years of pretending we don't care about each other when we both know. We both know what?" The words came out like a growl. "That you're scared." The accusation hit him like a physical blow. Logan Whitaker, who had stared down hostile board members, who had negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking, who had built an empire from nothing, scared. "I'm not scared of anything." Savannah stood up, crossing the room until she was close enough to touch him. "Your father left when you were 8. Your mother remarried 3 times before you turned 18. You lived in 12 different houses before you graduated high school." Logan's hand tightened around his whiskey glass. "Ancient history." "Is it?" Her voice was soft, understanding, and that somehow made it worse. "Because every time someone gets too close, you run. Every time someone wants more than you're willing to give." "I don't run." The words came out sharp, defensive. "I make smart choices." "What's smart about throwing away something real?" "This isn't real, Savannah." He gestured between them, his voice rising slightly. "This is convenient. This is temporary." The word hit her like a slap. Logan saw her flinch, saw the way her green eyes went bright with unshed tears, and he hated himself for it. But it was better this way. Better to hurt her now than to destroy her later. "Temporary," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "You knew what this was from the beginning." "Did I?" Savannah's laugh was bitter. "Because you call me at 2 in the morning when you can't sleep. You remember how I take my coffee. You keep my favorite wine in your kitchen even though you don't drink it." Each observation was like a knife twisting in his chest. Because she was right. Because somewhere along the way, their arrangement had become something else. Something terrifying and wonderful and completely outside his control. "Those are just details." "No, Logan. Those are choices. Choices you made because..." She stepped closer, her hand reaching up to touch his face. "Because you love me." The words hung in the air like a confession and an accusation rolled into one. Logan's breath caught in his throat, and for a moment, just a moment, He let himself imagine what it would be like to say yes, to admit that she was right, to take that leap into the unknown. Instead, he stepped back, away from her touch, away from the possibility of everything he had spent his life avoiding. "I don't love anyone, Savannah. I can't." The silence that followed was deafening. Logan watched as something in Savannah's face crumbled, as the hope in her eyes died and was replaced by something harder. Resignation. "I see." Her voice was steady now, professional. The lawyer was back, armor firmly in place. "Well, thank you for the clarification." She turned to leave, and Logan felt panic claw at his chest. "Savannah, wait." "No." She paused at the elevator, her back to him. "You've made yourself very clear. I won't make the mistake of thinking there's more here than there is." The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Savannah stepped inside, then turned to face him one last time. Her green eyes were dry now, but Logan could see the tears she was holding back. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "I think you're wrong. I think you do love me. You're just too scared to admit it." The doors closed, and Logan was alone. He stood there for a long time, staring at the spot where she had been, whiskey forgotten in his hand. Outside, the city continued its relentless pace, cars moving through streets like blood through veins, lights flickering in windows where other people lived other lives. Logan Whitaker had built an empire on making the right choices at the right time, but as he stood alone in his perfect penthouse, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a thought whispered like a ghost. What if she never comes back? Sometimes the most life-changing moments happen in the smallest spaces. Savannah stared at the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, her hands trembling as she sat on the cold marble floor of her downtown apartment bathroom. The silence was deafening. No traffic from the street below, no humming of appliances, just the sound of her own ragged breathing. Pregnant. The word echoed in her mind like a bell tolling. 3 weeks had passed since that night in Logan's penthouse. 3 weeks since he had looked her in the eye and told her he couldn't love anyone. 3 weeks of professional emails, canceled meetings, and the careful choreography of 2 people avoiding each other in a city that suddenly felt too small. She set the test on the counter with shaking fingers and buried her face in her hands. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had fallen in love with a man who had made it crystal clear that family was his greatest fear, and now she was carrying his children. Children, plural. The ultrasound appointment yesterday had revealed that surprise. 2 heartbeats, 2 tiny lives growing inside her. Twins. Savannah stood up slowly, catching her reflection in the bathroom mirror. She looked pale, hollow-eyed from the morning sickness that had been plaguing her for weeks. But underneath the exhaustion, there was something else. A fierce protectiveness that had nothing to do with logic and everything to do with love. She pressed her hand to her still flat stomach. "It's just us now," she whispered. Her phone buzzed from the counter. Logan's name flashed on the screen and her heart lurched. For a moment, she considered answering, considered telling him everything, considered giving him the chance to step up, to prove her wrong about his capacity for love. Instead, she let it go to voicemail. 20 minutes later, she found herself sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of herbal tea, staring at her laptop screen. The cursor blinked in the search bar. Family Law Attorneys, Vermont. Vermont. Her sister Brooklyn lived there, in a small town called Millbrook where children played in tree-lined streets and everyone knew their neighbors' names. It was everything Logan's world wasn't. Quiet, simple, real. The phone rang again. This time it was her office. "Savannah Carter speaking." "Ms. Carter, this is Janet from Mr. Whitaker's office." The assistant's voice was carefully neutral. "Mr. Whitaker would like to schedule a meeting regarding the Morrison acquisition." Savannah closed her eyes. "Tell Mr. Whitaker that I'll have the final contracts delivered by messenger. There's no need for a meeting." A pause. "He specifically requested, Janet," Savannah's voice was gentle but firm, "please tell him that Ms. Carter sends her regards, but she's unavailable for meetings." After hanging up, Savannah sat in the growing twilight of her apartment, making a list in her head of everything that would need to change. Her lease, her job, her entire life. But as she thought about raising 2 children alone, she didn't feel afraid. She felt free. The next morning, Savannah walked into the offices of Hartwell and Associates for what would be the last time. She had practiced this conversation in the mirror, rehearsed every word, but her heart still pounded as she knocked on James Hartwell's office door. "Come in." James looked up from his desk, his silver hair perfectly styled, his expensive suit impeccable as always. He had been her mentor, her advocate, the man who had given her the opportunity to work with clients like Logan Whitaker. "Savannah, good to see you. I heard Logan Whitaker has been asking for you specifically on the Morrison deal." "Actually, James, that's what I wanted to talk to you about." She sat down in the leather chair across from his desk, her resignation letter folded neatly in her purse. "I'm leaving." His eyebrows shot up. "Leaving? For another firm?" "Savannah, if this is about money—" "It's not about money." She pulled out the letter and placed it on his desk. "I'm leaving Boston. I'm starting over." James picked up the letter, scanning it quickly. "This is very sudden. Does this have anything to do with Whitaker?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Savannah had prepared for this, had practiced deflecting, but sitting there under James's concerned gaze, she found herself telling a version of the truth. "Logan and we had a personal relationship. It's over now. I need a fresh start." James leaned back in his chair, studying her face. "I see. And you're sure about this? You're one of the most promising corporate lawyers I've ever worked with. Walking away from this, it's a big risk. Sometimes the biggest risks lead to the most important rewards." That afternoon, Savannah found herself in Logan's office building, but not to see him. She was there to clean out her temporary workspace, to collect the personal items she had left behind during months of late nights and weekend sessions. She moved efficiently, packing her few belongings into a small box, a coffee mug, a small potted plant, a photo of her in Brooklyn at last year's Christmas dinner. "Savannah?" She turned to find Marcus Webb, one of Logan's junior executives, standing in the doorway. He looked nervous, the way people did when they were about to deliver news they didn't want to share. "Marcus, what can I do for you?" "Mr. Whitaker is looking for you. He's been asking everyone if they've seen you." Savannah continued packing, her movements deliberate and calm. "Mr. Whitaker and I have concluded our business arrangement. He seems upset. I've never seen him like this." Despite herself, Savannah felt her resolve waver slightly. "Like what?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Distracted? He's been staring out his window for hours. Missed 2 conference calls this morning." Logan Whitaker never missed conference calls. He treated business appointments like sacred obligations. "I'm sure he's fine," Savannah said, sealing the box with tape. "Please give him my best." As she walked toward the elevator, Savannah felt the weight of Marcus's gaze on her back. She also felt something else, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. Her skin prickled, and she knew without looking that Logan was standing somewhere behind her, that he had seen her leaving. She didn't turn around. The elevator doors closed, and Savannah pressed her hand to her stomach once more. "Just us," she whispered again. But as the elevator descended, carrying her away from Logan Whitaker and the life they might have had together, Savannah couldn't shake the feeling that she was making the right choice for all the wrong reasons. Or maybe the wrong choice for all the right ones. Either way, there was no going back now. The truth she carried would remain hers alone, and Logan would never know that his greatest fear had already come to pass. He was going to be a father, whether he wanted it or not. Sometimes the smallest towns hold the biggest transformations. The morning sun streamed through the lace curtains of Savannah's small apartment above Henderson's Bakery on Main Street in Millbrook, Vermont. 2 years had passed since she'd left Boston, and the woman who woke up each morning to the sound of church bells and bird songs bore little resemblance to the corporate lawyer who once lived for the rush of high-stakes negotiations. "Mama! Mama!" The sound of tiny feet pattering across hardwood floors brought a smile to Savannah's face before she was even fully awake. Theo burst through her bedroom door first, his blonde hair wild with sleep, green eyes bright with the kind of excitement that only toddlers possessed. Levi followed close behind, more cautious but equally determined, clutching his favorite stuffed elephant. At 15 months old, the twins were everything Savannah hadn't dared to hope for during those terrifying early days of pregnancy. Theo was the adventurer, climbing on everything, exploring every corner, speaking in enthusiastic gibberish that somehow made perfect sense to his brother. Levi was the observer, thoughtful, gentle, with an intensity in his green eyes that sometimes took Savannah's breath away because it reminded her so much of. She pushed that thought aside, as she had learned to do 1,000 times over the past 2 years. "Good morning, my loves," she whispered, scooping both boys into her bed for their morning ritual of cuddles and giggles. Theo babbled something that sounded like Nana, while Levi pressed his small hand against her cheek, studying her face with that serious expression that was becoming his trademark. "Yes, we're going to see Nana Brooklyn today," Savannah said, understanding Theo's attempt at words. "But first, breakfast." Downstairs in her tiny kitchen, Savannah moved with the efficient grace of a mother who had learned to do everything one-handed while balancing a child on her hip. The apartment was small but cozy. 2 bedrooms, a living area that doubled as her home office, and a kitchen just big enough for a small table where she and the boys shared their meals. It was nothing like Logan's penthouse with its sweeping views and marble surfaces, but it was theirs. The smell of fresh bread from the bakery below always made the apartment feel warm and welcoming. Mrs. Henderson, the 70-year-old owner, had become like a grandmother to the boys, often slipping them extra cookies when Savannah brought them downstairs for their morning walk. "Mama work?" Levi asked, pointing to the laptop on the kitchen counter where Savannah handled her family law cases. "Later, sweetheart. First we play." Savannah had found her calling in family law, helping parents navigate custody battles, assisting with adoptions, mediating divorce proceedings with compassion rather than corporate ruthlessness. The work paid less than corporate law, but it filled a part of her soul that she hadn't realized was empty. A knock at the door interrupted their breakfast routine. Savannah opened it to find Brooklyn standing there with her usual bright smile, her arms full of groceries, and her auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "Morning, sister. Ready for our adventure to the farmer's market?" Brooklyn had been Savannah's lifeline during those first difficult months. A nurse at the local hospital, she was 5 years younger but infinitely more practical about matters of the heart. She had never pressed Savannah for details about the boy's father, accepting only that he wasn't in the picture and that Savannah needed to build a life without him. "Uncle Brookie," Theo squealed, launching himself toward Brooklyn with the fearless enthusiasm of a child who had never known anything but love and acceptance. "Careful, Tornado," Brooklyn laughed, catching him easily. "Save some energy for the petting zoo." Levi approached more cautiously as always, but smiled when Brooklyn ruffled his hair. "Hey there, serious boy. Still thinking deep thoughts?" As they prepared to leave, Savannah caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror. Gone was the perfectly styled corporate attorney. In her place stood a woman in jeans and a comfortable sweater, her blonde hair in a simple ponytail, minimal makeup, laugh lines around her green eyes that spoke of genuine happiness rather than professional success. She looked content. The farmer's market was bustling with the weekend crowd, families with children, elderly couples examining produce, teenagers working summer jobs at the various booths. Savannah navigated the crowds with practiced ease, Theo in the stroller and Levi walking beside her, his small hand gripping hers tightly. "Miss Carter," Savannah turned to see Janet Morrison, one of her clients, approaching with a wide smile. Janet was fighting for custody of her 8-year-old daughter after leaving an abusive marriage, and Savannah had been working her case pro bono. "Janet, how are you doing?" "Better, thanks to you. The judge granted me primary custody yesterday." Janet's eyes filled with tears. "I can't thank you enough. You saved us." As Janet hugged her, Savannah felt that familiar warmth that came with knowing she was using her skills to truly help people. It was different from the adrenaline rush of closing million-dollar deals, but it was deeper, more lasting. "You saved yourself," Savannah said gently. "You just needed someone to believe in you." After Janet left, Brooklyn studied her sister's face. "You know, you get this look sometimes, when you help people like that, like you've found exactly where you're supposed to be." Savannah knelt down to help Levi pet a friendly golden retriever, watching as his serious expression melted into pure joy. "Maybe I have. Any regrets? About leaving Boston? About him?" The question caught Savannah off guard as it always did. She looked at her boys, Theo now charming the elderly woman selling apple cider with his infectious giggle, Levi still cautiously but determinedly petting the dog, and felt that familiar tightness in her chest. How can I regret anything that led to them? But as they walked home later that afternoon, the boys napping in their stroller, Savannah couldn't help but wonder about the man they would never know. Did Logan ever think about her? Did he wonder where she had gone? Did he miss the quiet moments they had shared, the conversations that happened in the space between words? She had made the right choice. She knew that with every fiber of her being. Logan had told her exactly who he was, what he could and couldn't offer. She had simply chosen to believe him. But sometimes, in the quiet moments after the boys were asleep, when the apartment felt too still and her dreams too vivid, Savannah wondered what might have happened if she had been brave enough to fight for them. What might have happened if she had trusted him enough to let him choose? "Mama?" Levi's sleepy voice pulled her from her thoughts. He was awake in the stroller, looking up at her with those impossibly familiar green eyes. "Yes, baby? Love you." It was one of his first clear phrases, and it hit Savannah like a physical blow, not from pain, but from the overwhelming force of pure, uncomplicated love. "I love you too, sweetheart. Always." And in that moment, surrounded by the simple beauty of a small town afternoon, Savannah knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she needed to be, even if it meant being there alone. Some moments divide life into before and after. Logan Whitaker stood at the back of the grand ballroom at the Boston Harbor Hotel, nursing a glass of champagne he had no intention of drinking. The annual Children's Legal Advocacy Gala was the kind of event he typically avoided. Too much emotion, too many bleeding hearts, too many reminders of the vulnerability he had spent his life avoiding. But his publicist had insisted. "Good for the company image," she had said. "Shows you care about social responsibility." If only she knew how little he cared about anything these days. 2 years, 731 days since Savannah had walked out of his life without explanation, leaving only a formal resignation letter and a forwarded address that led to nothing. He had tried to find her, hired private investigators, called in favors, even considered flying to Vermont himself when he learned she had moved there. But every lead went cold, and eventually Logan had forced himself to stop looking. He told himself it was for the best, that she had made the smart choice by leaving, that he would have only disappointed her in the end, the way he disappointed everyone who got too close. But the hollow ache in his chest suggested otherwise. Logan, Patricia Sinclair, the event organizer, materialized beside him with the kind of enthusiasm that made his teeth ache. "So wonderful to see you here. We have some truly inspiring speakers tonight." Logan nodded politely, his attention already drifting toward the exit. "I'm sure they're all very inspiring. Oh, you'll love our keynote speaker. She's a family law attorney from Vermont who's been doing absolutely revolutionary work with children's advocacy. Very young, very passionate." The lights dimmed, cutting Patricia off mid-sentence. Logan found himself trapped as the crowd settled into their seats and a spotlight illuminated the stage. He could leave now, make some excuse about urgent business, but something kept his feet planted to the marble floor. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed through the ballroom, "please welcome our keynote speaker, Savannah Carter." Logan's champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering against the floor with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the hushed ballroom. But he barely heard it over the roaring in his ears as a figure in a navy blue dress walked onto the stage. Savannah. 2 years had changed her. She moved with a different kind of confidence now, softer, more grounded, but no less powerful. Her blonde hair was shorter, framing her face in gentle waves. She wore minimal makeup, and when she smiled at the audience, Logan saw something in her green eyes that hadn't been there before. "Peace. Thank you for having me tonight." Savannah's voice carried clearly through the ballroom, and Logan felt it hit him like a physical blow. "I want to talk to you about something that changed my life completely. The moment I realized that every child deserves an advocate, someone who will fight for their right to be safe, to be loved, to be heard." Logan couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but watch the woman he had never been able to forget speak about passion and purpose with the kind of authenticity he had never possessed. 2 years ago, I was a corporate attorney," Savannah continued, and Logan's heart clenched. "I thought success meant winning at all costs, accumulating wealth and prestige. But then something happened that showed me what really matters." She paused, her hand moving unconsciously to her stomach in a gesture so brief Logan almost missed it. Almost. "I became a mother." The words hit Logan like a sledgehammer. Mother. Savannah was a mother. Someone else's children were calling her mama, running to her with scraped knees and bad dreams, filling her life with the kind of chaos and joy he had convinced himself he didn't want. "My boys, Theo and Levi, they're 15 months old now, and they've taught me more about unconditional love than any law book ever could." Boys. Twins. 15 months old. Logan's mind raced, calculating dates with the precision that had made him a billionaire. 15 months old meant they were born roughly 6 months after Savannah had left Boston, which meant, no, it was impossible. If Savannah had been pregnant when she left, if those children were his, she would have told him. She would have. "I want to share something personal with you tonight," Savannah said, and Logan saw her take a deep breath, steadying herself. Being a single mother isn't easy. There are days when you question every decision, when you wonder if you're enough, if you can give your children everything they need. Single mother. The words echoed in Logan's head as he watched Savannah's face, searching for any sign, any clue that might confirm the terrifying possibility that was taking root in his mind. But then you realize that love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up. It's about choosing to fight for the people who matter most, even when, especially when, it's hard. Logan's vision blurred slightly, and he realized his hands were shaking. He gripped the back of a nearby chair, trying to anchor himself as Savannah continued her speech about advocacy and justice and the fierce protectiveness that motherhood had awakened in her. So tonight, I want to ask you to think about the children in your community who need advocates, who need someone to believe in them, to fight for them, to show them that they matter. Savannah's eyes swept across the audience, and for one heart-stopping moment, Logan thought she saw him. Her speech faltered almost imperceptibly, her hand gripping the podium a little tighter, but she recovered quickly. Thank you for listening tonight, and thank you for caring about our most vulnerable citizens, our children. The applause was thunderous, but Logan barely heard it. He was moving before he realized it, pushing through the crowd toward the stage, his heart hammering against his ribs like a caged bird. But as he reached the front of the ballroom, he stopped, because there in the front row he saw them. Two small boys sitting next to an older woman who was clearly family, the same bone structure, the same gentle smile. The boys were dressed in tiny suits, their blonde hair carefully combed, their green eyes wide as they watched their mother on stage. Logan's green eyes. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as he stared at the children, his children, and felt everything he thought he knew about his life crumble into dust. Theo was clapping enthusiastically, his small hands creating an uneven rhythm that somehow managed to be perfectly in time with his excitement. Levi sat quietly, but his face was radiant with pride as he watched Savannah descend from the stage. Logan watched as Savannah scooped both boys into her arms, as Theo babbled something that made her laugh, as Levi pressed his face against her neck in the kind of trusting embrace that spoke of absolute security. I want to thank my boys Theo and Levi for letting Mama come to Boston tonight, Savannah said into the microphone, her voice warm with love. Mama loves you more than all the stars in the sky. And that's when Logan knew, with absolute certainty, that his worst fear and his greatest miracle had been living 200 miles away for the past 2 years. He was a father, and he had never felt more terrified or more desperate in his entire life. The hardest truths are spoken in whispers. Savannah felt the familiar rush of adrenaline as she finished her speech, but it was different this time, tinged with something that felt dangerously close to panic. For just a moment, in the sea of faces looking up at her, she could have sworn she saw. No, Logan Whitaker would never attend a children's advocacy gala. He made his feelings about children abundantly clear 2 years ago. She scooped Theo and Levi into her arms, their small bodies warm and solid against her chest, grounding her in the present moment. Theo immediately began chattering about the big room and lots of people, while Levi buried his face in her neck, overwhelmed by the crowd and noise. You did so good, sweetheart, Brooklyn whispered as she approached, taking Theo so Savannah could better comfort Levi. That was beautiful. Mama, go home now? Levi's voice was muffled against her shoulder, and Savannah felt her heart squeeze with protective love. Soon, baby. Just a few more minutes. But as she turned toward the exit, navigating through the crowd of well-wishers and potential donors, Savannah felt that prickle of awareness that had always warned her when Logan was near, the same electricity that had made her look up from legal briefs to find him watching her from across a conference room. She told herself she was imagining things. Stress from public speaking, the overwhelming environment, the memories that Boston always stirred up. But when a hand touched her arm, when that achingly familiar voice said her name, Savannah knew her instincts hadn't been wrong. Savannah. She turned slowly, Levi still in her arms, and there he was, Logan Whitaker, looking exactly the same and completely different all at once. The same sharp cheekbones, the same piercing green eyes, the same perfectly tailored suit. But there was something raw in his expression, something desperate and broken that she had never seen before. Logan? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. What are you doing here? He didn't answer immediately. His gaze moved from her face to Levi, who had lifted his head at the sound of voices, and was now studying this stranger with typical toddler curiosity. Logan's face went white as he stared into eyes that were identical to his own. Jesus, he whispered, so quietly only Savannah could hear him. Uncle Brookie has Theo, Levi announced to Savannah, apparently deciding Logan wasn't interesting enough to warrant continued attention. Want Uncle Brookie? In a minute, sweetheart. Savannah's arms tightened around her son protectively. Logan, I need to go. The boys are tired. Are they mine? The question hung between them like a blade. Savannah felt her carefully constructed world tilt as Logan's green eyes, so achingly familiar now that she saw them reflected in her children's faces every day, bore into hers with an intensity that made her feel stripped bare. I don't know what you mean. Don't. His voice was harsh, desperate. Please don't lie to me. Not about this. Savannah looked around the ballroom, acutely aware of the people still milling about, the curious glances being thrown their way. This wasn't the place for this conversation. It might never be the right place for this conversation. There's nothing to discuss, Logan. 15 months old, he said, and she could hear the barely controlled emotion in his voice. Twins, boys, with green eyes exactly like mine. Levi had grown restless, squirming in Savannah's arms and reaching toward where he could see Brooklyn and Theo near the exit. Mama down. Just a moment, baby. But Logan was staring at Levi with such naked longing that Savannah felt her resolve wavering. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, what she would say if Logan ever found out, how she would handle his questions, his anger, his demands, but she had never imagined the look of pure devastation on his face. You were pregnant when you left, Logan said quietly. That's why you left. It wasn't a question, but Savannah found herself nodding anyway. What was the point of lying now? Why didn't you tell me? The question she had dreaded, the one that had no good answer. Because how could she explain that she had been protecting him from something he had made clear he never wanted? How could she make him understand that she had left out of love, not spite? You said you never wanted children, Logan. You were very clear about that. So you made the decision for both of us? I made the decision for them. Savannah's voice was fierce now, maternal instinct overriding everything else. You told me you couldn't love anyone. You told me children would destroy you. Did you want me to trap you in exactly the situation you feared most? Logan flinched as if she had slapped him. You could have. Could have what? Forced you to be a father you didn't want to be? Watched you resent them for existing? Savannah shook her head. No, I wouldn't do that to them. I wouldn't do that to you. Mama! Theo's voice carried across the ballroom as he spotted her. He had escaped from Brooklyn and was toddling toward them with the determined gait of a child on a mission. Logan turned at the sound, and Savannah watched his face crumple as he saw Theo approaching. Blonde hair catching the light, green eyes bright with excitement, arms outstretched toward his mother. Mama, up, up. Savannah knelt down, settling Levi on the floor so she could catch Theo as he launched himself into her arms. For a moment she was surrounded by her boys, their small hands patting her face and hair, their chatter filling the space around her with warmth and love. When she looked up, Logan was staring at them with such raw hunger that it took her breath away. They don't know, he said, and it wasn't a question. They're too young to understand. What do they call me? When they ask? Savannah felt tears prick at her eyes. They don't ask yet. They're babies, Logan. Their world is very small and very simple. And when they're older, when they start asking where their father is, the question hit her like a physical blow, because it was the one that kept her awake at night. The one she hadn't figured out how to answer yet. I don't know, she admitted quietly. Logan was quiet for a long moment, watching as Theo babbled to Levi in their private twin language, as Levi leaned against Savannah's leg for comfort, while still maintaining his curious distance from this stranger. I want to know them, Logan said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Savannah felt her world shift again, tectonic plates moving beneath her feet. Logan, I know I have no right to ask. I know I screwed up everything I touched 2 years ago, but they're my sons, Savannah. And he stopped, seeming to struggle with words. I can't unknow that they exist. Brooklyn appeared beside them, Savannah's purse in her hand and concern written across her face. Everything okay? The boys are getting cranky. Savannah stood up, gathering Theo and Levi close to her sides. They were indeed getting fussy, overwhelmed by the long day and the strange environment. Levi was rubbing his eyes and Theo was starting to make the whimpering sounds that meant a meltdown wasn't far behind. We need to go, Savannah said to Logan. It's past their bedtime. Logan nodded, but his eyes never left the boys. Can we talk tomorrow, please? Savannah felt the weight of 2 years' worth of decisions pressing down on her shoulders. The careful life she had built in Vermont, the peace she had found, the security she had given her children, all of it suddenly felt fragile as glass, But looking at Logan's face, seeing the desperate hope there, she found herself nodding. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock, there's a coffee shop called Millbrook Cafe on Main Street in my town. I'll be there. As they walked toward the exit, Levi looked back over Savannah's shoulder at Logan, who was still standing exactly where they had left him, watching them go. Mama, Levi said quietly. Sad man. Savannah's breath caught in her throat. What, sweetheart? Sad man, Levi repeated, pointing back toward Logan. Like Mama sometimes. And in that moment, Savannah realized that her 15-month-old son had seen something in Logan that she had been too afraid to acknowledge. That maybe, just maybe, Logan Whitaker's greatest fear hadn't been having children. Maybe it had been losing them. Some conversations require the courage to be completely vulnerable. Logan Whitaker had negotiated billion-dollar deals in boardrooms around the world, but he had never been more nervous than he was sitting in the corner booth of Millbrook Cafe at 1:45 p.m., waiting for Savannah to arrive. The small coffee shop was everything his world wasn't. Mismatched furniture, local art on the walls, the kind of lived-in warmth that money couldn't buy. Through the large windows, he could see the quaint main street of the town Savannah had chosen to call home. Children rode bicycles on sidewalks. Elderly couples walked hand in hand, and everything moved at a pace that seemed impossible to someone who lived his life in conference calls and stock market alerts. This was where she had built a life without him, where his sons were learning to walk and talk and exist in the world. The bell above the door chimed, and Logan's heart stopped as Savannah walked in. She wore jeans and a soft green sweater that brought out her eyes, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger somehow, more at peace than he had ever seen her, but he could see the tension in the way she carried herself. She spotted him immediately and walked over, sliding into the booth across from him with careful precision, maintaining distance even in the small space. You came, she said, and Logan heard the surprise in her voice. Did you think I wouldn't? Savannah studied his face for a moment. The Logan I knew 2 years ago would have had his lawyers draw up custody papers by now. The observation hit harder than she probably intended, because she was right. 2 years ago, Logan's first instinct would have been to control the situation, to use his wealth and power to get what he wanted. But sitting here now, in this place that belonged entirely to Savannah's new world, he felt like a stranger to that version of himself. Where are they? He asked quietly. With Brooklyn, at the park. Savannah's protective instincts were clearly still on high alert. They don't understand why Mama needed to meet the sad man from last night. Logan winced. Levi said that? Children see things we think we're hiding. Savannah's voice was gentle but firm. They're very intuitive. A waitress approached, a young woman with pink hair and a warm smile who clearly knew Savannah well. The usual Savannah? And for your friend? Coffee, black, Logan said automatically. And I'll take a chai latte, thanks, Kimber. When they were alone again, silence stretched between them like a chasm. Logan found himself studying Savannah's hands as she traced patterns on the worn wooden table. No wedding ring, no engagement ring, but there were other changes. Small calluses from playground equipment and stroller handles, a tiny scar on her thumb from some domestic accident, the short practical nails of a mother who had more important things to do than maintain perfect manicures. You said you wanted to know them, Savannah said finally. What does that mean to you? Logan had prepared for this question during the sleepless night he'd spent in his Boston hotel room, but now, faced with Savannah's direct gaze, all his rehearsed answers seemed inadequate. I don't know, he admitted. I don't know how to be a father. And you think I knew how to be a mother? Savannah's laugh was soft, but not unkind. I learned by doing, by making mistakes, by getting up at 3 a.m. when they had nightmares and figuring out how to make them feel safe. But you chose it. You wanted to be their mother. I chose them, Savannah corrected. There's a difference. Logan's coffee arrived, and he wrapped his hands around the mug, needing something to anchor him. Tell me about them, about who they are. For the first time since she'd sat down, Savannah's face softened. He's fearless. He climbs everything, explores everything, talks to everyone. He has this laugh that's completely infectious when he's happy. Everyone around him is happy. And Levi? Levi is the thinker. He watches everything, processes everything. He's incredibly gentle, with animals, with other children, with anything fragile. But he's also surprisingly stubborn when he's made up his mind about something. Savannah paused. He looks just like you when he's concentrating on something. The simple observation hit Logan like a physical blow. His son, had inherited something from him beyond just eye color. What do they like? What makes them happy? Books. They both love being read to, especially before bed. Theo likes the silly ones with lots of pictures and sounds. Levi prefers the quiet stories, the ones with meaning. Savannah's voice grew warmer as she talked about them. They love music. There's this little player piano at the music store downtown, and they could watch it for hours. And they're obsessed with airplanes. Every time one flies over, everything stops until it's out of sight. Logan tried to picture it. Two small boys looking up at the sky with wonder, pointing at something he took for granted every time he traveled for business. Do they ask about me? About having a father? Savannah hesitated. Not yet, but they will. Theo especially. He notices that other children have daddies. He hasn't started asking questions, but he will soon. What will you tell them? I don't know. The admission seemed to cost her something. I've been dreading that conversation since the day they were born. Logan leaned forward, his voice urgent. Let me be part of their lives, Savannah. Let me try. And when you realize it's too hard, when you remember why you never wanted children in the first place, what happens to them then? The question hung between them like an accusation, because she was right to ask it. Logan had spent 38 years avoiding exactly this situation, convinced that he was incapable of the kind of love that children needed. I can't promise I'll be perfect, he said quietly. I can't promise I'll know what I'm doing, but I can promise that I won't walk away. You walked away from me. That was different. Was it? Savannah's green eyes were sharp now, cutting through his defenses. Because it seems like the same pattern to me. When things get too real, too complicated, too emotionally demanding, you shut down. Logan felt his chest tighten with a familiar panic. Because she was right. Because walking away had always been his survival mechanism. His way of maintaining control. You're right, he admitted. I was scared. I am scared. But Savannah, he stopped, struggling with words he had never learned how to say. When I saw them last night, when I realized they were mine, I felt something I've never felt before. What? Complete. The word came out barely above a whisper. For the first time in my life, I felt complete. Savannah stared at him for a long moment, and Logan saw something shift in her expression. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the possibility of it. They're not toys, Logan. They're not business deals you can negotiate. They're little people with feelings and needs and the capacity to be hurt in ways that last forever. I know. Do you? Because if you walk into their lives and then change your mind, if you let them love you and then decide you're not cut out for this, Savannah's voice grew fierce with protective love. I will not let you break their hearts the way you broke mine. The accusation hit Logan harder than any hostile takeover, any financial loss he had ever experienced, because for the first time, he understood the true cost of his emotional cowardice. I broke your heart? Savannah looked away, but not before he saw the tears she was trying to hide. You know you did. I thought I was protecting you. From me. From disappointment. You were protecting yourself. Her voice was quiet but steady, and maybe that was the right choice for you. But it wasn't your choice to make for me. Logan felt something crack open in his chest. Some wall he had built so long ago he had forgotten it was there. I'm sorry. God, Savannah, I'm so sorry. I don't need your apology, Logan. I need your commitment. To them. Because if you're going to be in their lives, you have to be all in. No half measures. No running when it gets difficult. Logan met her eyes across the small table, seeing the woman who had loved him enough to let him go, who had carried his children alone rather than trap him in a life he claimed not to want. I'm all in, he said. And for the first time in his life, he meant it completely. Then we start slow, very slow. Savannah's voice was carefully controlled. You can meet them properly. Spend some time with them. See if this is really what you want. It is. Prove it. Logan nodded, understanding that this was his one chance, maybe his only chance to become the man his sons needed him to be. Where do we start? Savannah was quiet for a moment, and Logan could see her weighing his words against years of careful protection. Tomorrow, she said finally. The park on Maple Street, 2 o'clock, 1 hour. And if it goes well, then we try again. Savannah stood up, gathering her purse. But Logan, if you hurt them, if you let them down, there won't be another chance. I hope you understand that. As she walked toward the door, Logan called after her. Savannah? She turned back. Thank you for giving me this chance. She studied his face for a moment, and Logan saw something in her eyes that he hadn't seen in 2 years. Hope. Don't make me regret it, she said quietly. And as the door closed behind her, Logan sat alone in the small cafe, surrounded by the life she had built without him, and made a promise to himself and to the sons he barely knew. He would not let them down. He couldn't afford to. Love sometimes begins with the smallest gestures. Logan arrived at Maple Street Park 15 minutes early, his hands shaking slightly as he gripped the steering wheel of his rental car. He had changed clothes 3 times that morning, finally settling on jeans and a simple button-down shirt, the most casual outfit he owned, though it still probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Through the windshield, he could see the playground where Savannah would bring his sons. The word still felt foreign in his mind. Sons, plural. 2 little people who shared his DNA, his eyes, possibly his stubborn streak if Savannah's description of Levi was accurate. A black SUV pulled into the parking space next to his, and Logan's heart stopped as he saw Savannah emerge from the driver's side. She moved around to the back seat, and Logan found himself holding his breath as she lifted out 2 car seats. Theo came first, already chattering excitedly about the big slides and swings up high. Even from a distance, Logan could see his animated gestures, the way his small hands moved as he talked. Then came Levi, quieter but equally alert, his green eyes, Logan's eyes, taking in everything around him with careful observation. Logan climbed out of his car on unsteady legs, feeling more nervous than he had ever been in his life. Billion-dollar board meetings had nothing on this moment. "Mama, airplane!" Theo suddenly shouted, pointing at a small plane passing overhead. Both boys stopped everything to watch it disappear behind the clouds, just as Savannah had described. "Bye-bye, airplane," Levi said solemnly, waving his small hand. The simple interaction hit Logan like a physical blow. These were his children, his actual children, with personalities and preferences, and the kind of innocent wonder he had forgotten existed. Savannah saw him approaching and bent down to the boy's level. "Remember the man from yesterday? He's coming to play with us today." Theo looked up at Logan with curiosity but no fear. "You play slides?" Logan knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with both boys. Up close, the resemblance was unmistakable. Not just the green eyes, but the shape of their faces, the way Levi's eyebrows drew together when he was thinking. "I can try," Logan said, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. "What kind of slides do you like?" "Big ones," Theo exclaimed, then immediately took off toward the playground equipment with the fearless energy Savannah had described. Levi remained closer to his mother, studying Logan with that intense gaze that seemed far too mature for a 15-month-old. "He's shy at first," Savannah explained quietly, "but he warms up." Logan nodded, not trusting his voice, because looking at Levi, really looking at him, was like seeing himself as a child before the walls went up, before he learned that distance was safer than connection. "Levi liked books," Levi announced suddenly, apparently deciding Logan deserved this piece of information. "I like books too," Logan managed. "What's your favorite?" Levi considered this seriously. "Bear book, brown bear, brown bear, brown bear. What do you see?" Savannah translated with a small smile. "We read it every night." "Mama, come." Theo's voice carried across the playground where he had already climbed to the top of the largest slide structure. "Coming, sweetheart," Savannah called back, then looked at Logan. "Ready?" Logan wasn't sure he would ever be ready, but he nodded anyway. The next hour passed in a blur of new experiences that rewrote everything Logan thought he knew about himself. He found himself crouched in a sandbox helping Theo build what the toddler insisted was a castle for dinosaurs. He pushed Levi on a small swing, marveling at the pure joy on his son's face as he went higher and higher, calling out, "More, more," with uncontainable delight. When Theo scraped his knee on the playground equipment, Logan watched in amazement as Savannah transformed into a one-woman medical team, producing Band-Aids and comfort with the efficiency of someone who had done this countless times. But what struck him most was how Theo immediately stopped crying when she kissed the Band-Aid and declared it all better. "Kiss, make better," Levi explained seriously to Logan, as if this were a fundamental law of the universe. "Always?" Logan asked. "Always," Levi confirmed with the absolute certainty of a child who had never known a world where mama's kisses didn't fix everything. As the hour drew to a close, Logan found himself sitting on a bench with Levi in his lap, something that had happened so naturally he barely realized it was occurring. Levi was showing him a small toy truck, explaining in his limited vocabulary how the wheels turned and the back lifted up. "Truck go beep beep," Levi said, making the sound effect with serious concentration. Beep beep, Logan repeated and was rewarded with a smile that literally took his breath away. Theo had climbed onto the bench beside them, leaning against Logan's arm as he watched an older child on the monkey bars. "I do that someday," he announced confidently. "You will," Logan said, and suddenly he could picture it, teaching them to use the monkey bars, catching them when they fell, cheering them on when they succeeded. "Time to go, boys," Savannah said gently, and Logan felt a sharp pang of disappointment. "5 more minutes?" Theo asked, using what was clearly a well-practiced negotiation tactic. "We can come back another day," Savannah said, then looked at Logan. "If Logan wants to." "I want to," Logan said immediately, then caught himself. "I mean, if that's okay. If you want me to." Theo jumped up and down. "Logan, come back. Logan, come back." Levi slid down from Logan's lap but didn't move away. Instead, he reached up and patted Logan's face with one small hand, the same gesture Logan had seen him do with Savannah. "You sad today?" Levi asked, tilting his head with concern. Logan felt his throat tighten. "Not sad. Happy." "Good," Levi said solemnly, then turned and walked toward his mother. As they gathered their things to leave, Theo ran back to Logan and wrapped his small arms around Logan's legs in an impulsive hug. "Bye-bye, Logan. See you soon." Logan knelt down, and for the first time in his life hugged his child. Theo smelled like sunshine and playground dust, and something indefinably sweet that Logan realized must just be the scent of childhood. "See you soon, buddy." When they reached their cars, Savannah was quiet as she buckled the boys into their car seats. Both children were tired from their adventure, Levi already drooping with exhaustion and Theo fighting sleep with the determination of someone who didn't want to miss anything. "How was that?" Savannah asked quietly, her back to Logan as she adjusted Theo's straps. "Terrifying," Logan admitted. "And perfect." Savannah turned to face him, and Logan saw something in her expression that hadn't been there before. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. "They liked you. I liked them too. More than liked." Logan struggled with words that seemed too small for what he was feeling. "I never understood before what you meant about unconditional love. And now?" Logan looked through the car window at his sons. Levi already asleep, Theo fighting a losing battle against heavy eyelids. "Now I think I'd do anything to keep them safe, to make them happy." Savannah studied his face for a long moment. "Tomorrow's Saturday. We usually go to the farmer's market in the morning. Would you like to come?" "Yes." The answer came without hesitation. "It's not exciting, just buying vegetables and letting them see the animals." "It sounds perfect." As Savannah drove away with his children, Logan sat in his car for a long time, watching them disappear around the corner. His hands were no longer shaking, but his heart was racing for an entirely different reason. For the first time in his life, Logan Whitaker understood what it meant to have something worth fighting for, something worth becoming better for, and as he finally started his car and drove back toward his hotel, Logan made another promise to himself. He was going to learn how to be the father Theo and Levi deserved, no matter how long it took. Trust is built one moment at a time, one choice at a time. 3 weeks had passed since that first afternoon at the park, and Logan had kept every promise he'd made. Every Saturday morning at the farmer's market, every Wednesday afternoon at the playground, every Sunday evening for dinner at Savannah's small apartment above the bakery. Today felt different, though. Today, Savannah had asked him to watch the boys alone while she attended a client meeting that had run longer than expected. Logan stood in Savannah's living room, surrounded by the controlled chaos that came with twin toddlers. Theo was building an elaborate tower with wooden blocks, narrating his construction process in a steady stream of chatter. Levi sat nearby with a picture book, carefully turning each page and pointing out objects he recognized. "Truck," Levi announced, showing Logan a page with various vehicles. "That's a big truck," Logan agreed, settling onto the floor beside him. 3 weeks ago, sitting cross-legged on a carpet covered with toys would have been unthinkable. Now it felt natural. "Logan, look," Theo called out, having completed his tower. "It's taller than me." "Wow, that's impressive. What are you going to build next?" "A house for Levi." Theo immediately began dismantling his tower with the same enthusiasm he'd used to build it. Logan marveled at how effortlessly his sons moved through their world, how present they were in each moment. They didn't worry about stock prices or board meetings or the 1,000 things that usually consumed his thoughts. They simply existed, fully and completely, in whatever they were doing. His phone buzzed with a text from his assistant in Boston. Board meeting moved to 3 p.m. Monday. Need confirmation on the Morrison parameters. Logan looked at the screen, then at his sons, and made a decision that would have shocked his business partners. He turned the phone off and slipped it into his pocket. Daddy Logan, help. Theo had gotten ambitious with his house construction and managed to scatter blocks across half the living room. Logan froze. Daddy Logan. It was the first time either boy had called him anything resembling a parental term, and the words hit him with unexpected force. Did you just call me Daddy Logan? He asked carefully. Theo looked up from his blocks with a matter-of-fact expression. Mama says you're our daddy. Daddy Logan sounds nice. Logan felt his chest tighten with emotion. He glanced at Levi, who was watching this exchange with his typical thoughtful intensity. Is that okay with you guys if I'm your daddy? Levi considered this seriously, then nodded. Daddy Logan gives good hugs. The simple acceptance nearly undid him. No conditions, no negotiations, no contracts. Just pure, uncomplicated love offered freely. I'd like that very much, Logan managed, his voice rougher than usual. The afternoon continued with the kind of domestic routine Logan had never imagined himself enjoying. He made them lunch. Grilled cheese sandwiches cut into triangles, which Theo informed him was the best way. He read them stories during quiet time, marveling at how they curled up on either side of him like small, trusting animals. When Levi started getting cranky, Logan recognized the signs Savannah had taught him and suggested a walk to see the ducks at the small pond behind the apartment building. Both boys perked up immediately. Ducks! Theo shouted, already running toward the door. Bread for ducks? Levi asked hopefully. Logan remembered the bag of old bread Savannah kept for this exact purpose. Of course. The pond was peaceful in the late afternoon light, with a small family of mallards gliding across the surface. Logan sat on a bench with his sons, watching them carefully tear bread into duck-appropriate pieces with the seriousness of scientists conducting important research. Daddy Logan, Theo said suddenly, not looking up from his bread tearing, why you live in a hotel? The question caught Logan off guard. What do you mean? Mama says you live in a hotel in Boston. Why not here with us? Logan felt his breath catch. The innocent question cut straight to the heart of everything he'd been trying not to think about for 3 weeks. What was his long-term plan? How did this work? Could he really divide his life between Boston and Vermont indefinitely? It's complicated, buddy. I have work in Boston. You could work here, Levi said quietly, his logical mind already working through solutions. Mama works here. That's different. Mama's work is here. So move your work, Theo said with the simple logic of a child who couldn't understand why adults made things so difficult. Before Logan could attempt to explain the complexities of running a billion-dollar company, his phone rang. Despite his earlier resolution to ignore it, the ringtone indicated it was his head of operations, someone who only called for genuine emergencies. I need to take this, he said apologetically. Stay right here by the ducks, okay? Marcus, this better be important. Logan, thank God. We have a situation with the Singapore deal. The whole thing's falling apart, and Chen is threatening to pull out entirely. We need you here tonight for an emergency video conference with the board. Logan looked at his sons, who were still focused on their duck-feeding mission, completely absorbed in their simple task. The old Logan would have been on a plane within the hour. The old Logan would have seen this as proof that he couldn't have both worlds. Can't it wait until Monday? Logan, this is a $800 million deal. Chen specifically asked for you. If we lose this, then we lose it. The words came out before Logan fully realized he was saying them. Find another way, Marcus. I'm not available until Monday. The silence on the other end was telling. In 15 years of working together, Logan had never put anything before business. Are you feeling all right? This is completely unlike you. Logan watched Theo help Levi reach over the pond's edge to drop his bread closer to the ducks. Maybe that's the problem. After hanging up, Logan sat back down between his sons, trying to process what he'd just done. He had essentially walked away from hundreds of millions of dollars to spend the afternoon feeding ducks with 2 toddlers. And he didn't regret it for a second. Daddy Logan sad? Levi asked, apparently sensing his internal conflict. No, little man. Not sad. Good. Levi leaned against Logan's arm, offering comfort in the unconscious way children did. When Savannah returned an hour later, she found all 3 of them on the living room floor, Logan reading Brown Bear, for what was probably the 10th time while Theo acted out all the animals and Levi turned the pages. How did it go? She asked, and Logan could hear the careful note in her voice. The question of a mother who had left her children with someone she was still learning to trust. "They called me Daddy Logan," Logan said quietly, and watched Savannah's face soften. "And how do you feel about that?" Logan looked at his sons, who had abandoned the book in favor of climbing on him like he was playground equipment. Theo was attempting to balance on his back while Levi had claimed his lap as the perfect spot for examining a toy car. "Terrified," he admitted, "and honored, and completely out of my depth. That sounds about right for parenthood." That evening, after the boys were in bed, Logan and Savannah sat at her small kitchen table with cups of tea. It was becoming a routine, these quiet conversations after the children were asleep, where they navigated the complex territory of co-parenting and whatever was growing between them again. "I turned down a business meeting today," Logan said suddenly. $800 million, and I chose to feed ducks instead. Savannah's eyebrows rose. "How do you feel about that?" "Like I'm becoming someone I don't recognize. Someone who might actually be capable of this." "You are capable of this, Logan. You've been proving it for 3 weeks. Logan was quiet for a moment, turning his teacup in his hands. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the moment when I realize I can't do this, that I'm going to let them down. And what if that moment never comes?" The question hung between them like a possibility neither of them had dared to voice. "Then I guess I'd have to figure out how to be the man they need me to be." Savannah reached across the table and covered his hand with hers, the first time she had initiated physical contact since he'd come back into their lives. "You're already becoming him," she said quietly. As Logan drove back to his hotel that night, he found himself thinking about Theo's innocent question. Why did he live in a hotel? Why not here with them? For the first time since this all began, Logan allowed himself to imagine a different kind of life. One where he woke up to the sound of small feet running down hallways, where his biggest decisions involved which playground to visit and whether grilled cheese needed to be cut into triangles or squares. It was a terrifying thought. It was also the most appealing thing he'd ever imagined. And as he fell asleep that night, Logan wondered if maybe, just maybe, his sons were right. Maybe it really could be that simple. Sometimes the biggest risks lead to the most important rewards. Logan stood outside Savannah's apartment building at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, holding 2 cups of coffee and trying to work up the courage to knock. He had been driving around Millbrook for an hour, rehearsing what he wanted to say, but now that he was here, all his carefully planned words seemed inadequate. The decision had crystallized the night before, during yet another emergency conference call about the Singapore deal. As he sat in his sterile hotel room listening to his board members argue about profit margins and market projections, Logan had felt something shift inside him, a quiet but definitive click, like a lock finally opening. He knocked softly, aware that the boys were probably still sleeping. Savannah opened the door in her pajamas, her blonde hair tousled from sleep, surprise clear on her face. "Logan? What are you doing here? Is everything okay?" "I need to tell you something," he said, offering her one of the coffee cups. "Can we talk?" She studied his face, then stepped aside to let him in. The apartment was peaceful in the early morning light, toys neatly arranged from the previous evening's cleanup, the faint scent of the bakery below already beginning to fill the air. They sat at her small kitchen table, the same spot where they'd shared so many careful conversations over the past month, but this time felt different, final. "I'm moving here," Logan said without preamble, "to Millbrook, permanently." Savannah's coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips. "What?" "I've been thinking about what Theo said, about why I live in a hotel, and he's right. It doesn't make sense anymore." Logan leaned forward, his green eyes intense. "Nothing about my old life makes sense anymore." "Logan, you can't just uproot your entire life because a toddler asked you a question." "I'm not uprooting my life. I'm finally building one." Logan ran his hands through his hair, trying to find the right words. "Do you know what I realized last night? I've spent 38 years building an empire, accumulating wealth and power and success, and I've never once felt the kind of joy I get from reading Brown Bear to Levi for the 10th time in a row." Savannah was quiet, but Logan could see her processing, could see the careful hope warring with protective skepticism in her green eyes. "What about your company, your board? You can't just walk away from billions of dollars." "I'm not walking away. I'm restructuring." Logan had spent the entire night working through the logistics, making calls, setting plans in motion. "I can run the company remotely for the most part. I'll keep the Boston penthouse for when I need to be there, but this," he gestured around the small apartment, "this is where I want to be. And when you get bored, When small-town life loses its novelty, the question hit exactly where Logan had expected it to, because she was right to ask it, because his track record spoke for itself. Then I'll figure it out. But Savannah, I need you to understand something. Logan reached across the table, covering her hands with his. This isn't about novelty. This isn't about some midlife crisis or temporary fantasy. This is about the fact that I wake up every morning thinking about Theo's laugh and Levi's serious questions. This is about wanting to be there when they take their first steps, say their first real words, start school, learn to ride bikes. Savannah's eyes filled with tears she was trying not to shed. You're scaring me. Why? Because I want to believe you. Because I've been trying so hard not to hope for this and you're making it impossible. Logan felt his heart break and mend simultaneously. What are you afraid of? That you'll change your mind. That 6 months from now, you'll remember why you never wanted this life and you'll leave again. And this time you won't just be breaking my heart, you'll be breaking theirs too. From down the hallway came the sound of small feet hitting the floor, followed by Theo's voice calling, "Mama, I'm hungry." Both adults turned toward the sound, and Logan felt that familiar tightness in his chest that came with overwhelming love. "Daddy Logan." Theo appeared in the kitchen doorway, his hair sticking up in every direction, wearing dinosaur pajamas. "You're here early. I wanted to see you guys before I had to make some important phone calls." Levi appeared behind his brother, moving with his usual cautious approach to the day. But when he saw Logan, his serious face broke into a smile. "Daddy Logan, read books? After breakfast, buddy." Logan helped Savannah make breakfast, moving around her small kitchen with a familiarity that had developed over weeks of shared mornings. He knew where she kept the good plates, which pan she preferred for pancakes, how Theo liked his cut into small pieces, while Levi preferred his whole. As they sat around the table, Logan watched his sons eat their breakfast with the focused intensity that children brought to important tasks. Theo chattered about a dream he'd had involving dinosaurs and ice cream trucks. Levi carefully examined each bite before eating it, occasionally offering commentary on the texture or temperature. This was what he had been missing his entire life without knowing it. "Daddy Logan," Theo said suddenly, syrup covering most of his face. "Are you sad today?" "No, buddy." "Why? You look like you're thinking big thoughts." "Mama gets that face when she has big thoughts." Logan glanced at Savannah, who was watching this exchange with careful attention. "I'm thinking big thoughts," Logan admitted. "I'm thinking about how much I love you and Levi and your mama." The words slipped out before Logan could stop them, and the kitchen fell silent. Levi looked up from his pancakes with interest, as if this were simply another piece of information to process. Theo grinned with syrup-sticky satisfaction. "We love you too, Daddy Logan." But Logan was looking at Savannah, whose face had gone pale. "Boys," she said carefully, "why don't you go brush your teeth? I need to talk to Daddy Logan for a minute." After the boys had thundered down the hallway, Savannah turned to face Logan with an expression he couldn't read. "Did you mean that? What you just said?" Logan felt his heart hammering against his ribs. "Yes." "Which part?" "All of it." Logan stood up, needing to pace, needing to move. "I love Theo's fearless enthusiasm and Levi's thoughtful questions. I love the way they trust me completely, even though I've done nothing to earn it. I love watching you be their mother, the way you know exactly what they need before they know it themselves." Logan. "And I love you, Savannah. I love the woman you were in Boston, but I'm completely in awe of the woman you've become here. You built this beautiful life, raised these incredible children, found work that matters, all while I was sitting in my empty penthouse convincing myself that isolation was strength." Savannah stood up too, tears flowing freely now. "You can't just say things like that. You can't just walk back into our lives and what? Love you? Because I do. I have since the beginning. I was just too scared to admit it. And now you're not scared?" Logan laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm terrified. I'm more scared than I've ever been in my life. But I'm more scared of living without you, without them. What if it's not enough? What if love isn't enough to make this work?" Logan crossed the small kitchen in 2 steps, taking her face in his hands. "Then we'll figure it out. Together. Because that's what people who love each other do. They figure it out." Savannah looked up at him, and Logan saw the exact moment when her last wall crumbled. "I never stopped loving you," she whispered. "Even when I hated you for leaving, even when I was terrified you'd come back, I never stopped." Logan kissed her then, soft and gentle, and full of 2 years' worth of regret and hope and desperate love. When they broke apart, both were crying. "Daddy Logan, Mama!" Theo's voice came from the hallway. We brushed our teeth. Story time. Logan rested his forehead against Savannah's, both of them laughing through their tears. We should probably talk about logistics, Savannah said, about how this actually works. Later, Logan said, taking her hand. Right now, I have a very important appointment to read stories to my sons. As they walked toward the living room where Theo and Levi were already arranging themselves on the couch with an armload of books, Logan felt something he had never experienced before. He felt like he was exactly where he belonged. Brown Bear first, Levi announced, holding up the familiar book. Brown Bear it is, Logan agreed, settling onto the couch with a boy on each side, and the woman he loved curled up beside them. And as he began to read the simple, repetitive words that his son had memorized by heart, Logan realized that he had finally found his happy ending. It didn't look anything like he had expected. It looked like everything he had never known he wanted. Where love takes root. 18 months later, the autumn sun streamed through the windows of the small house on Elm Street, painting golden rectangles across the hardwood floor, where 3-year-old Theo and Levi sat building an elaborate train track that wound through the living room under the dining table and around the couch where Logan sat with his laptop balanced on his knees. Daddy, the bridge is broken, Levi announced with the serious tone he used for engineering emergencies. Logan set aside the quarterly report he'd been reviewing and slid down to the floor. Let's see what we can do about that. In the 18 months since he'd made the decision to build a life in Millbrook, Logan had learned that the most important negotiations happened on living room floors, over broken toy trains and bedtime stories. He'd also learned that he was surprisingly good at both. The house itself was everything his Boston penthouse wasn't. A 1920s colonial with creaky floors, drafty windows, and a backyard where the boys could chase fireflies on summer evenings. Logan had bought it 6 months after moving to town, 3 months after he'd asked Savannah to marry him under the old oak tree in Maple Street Park, 2 months before their simple wedding ceremony in the same spot. There, Logan said, connecting the final piece of track. Emergency bridge repair complete. Thanks, Daddy. Theo was already pushing his train through the newly fixed section, making elaborate sound effects that Levi critiqued for accuracy. From the kitchen came the sound of Savannah on a conference call with a client in California, a custody case she was handling pro bono, fighting for a father who wanted to be part of his children's lives. Her practice had grown significantly since Logan moved to town, partly because of his connections, but mostly because word had spread about the attorney who actually cared about families more than fees. Logan had restructured his entire business model, delegating day-to-day operations to a team he trusted while keeping strategic oversight from his home office, a converted bedroom that the boys had helped him decorate with artwork they'd made in preschool. He traveled to Boston twice a month now instead of living there, and had discovered that distance gave him clarity about which deals actually mattered. Most didn't. Daddy Logan, Levi said, abandoning his train to climb into Logan's lap. Tell me about when you were scared. It had become one of Levi's favorite bedtime stories, the tale of how Daddy Logan had been afraid to love them, but then realized that love wasn't scary, it was the best thing in the world. Theo preferred the version where Daddy Logan had been sad until he found them, which made everything better. Both versions were true. Well, Logan began, settling Levi more comfortably. Once upon a time, there was a man who thought he was very smart because he worked all the time and never let anyone too close to his heart. The story was interrupted by the front door opening and the sound of small feet running across the hardwood. Theo, Levi! 4-year-old Brooklyn Chen burst into the living room, followed by her mother, Dr. Amanda Chen, who had become Savannah's closest friend since they'd met at a PTA meeting. Daddy Logan? Brooklyn had decided months ago that Logan was everyone's daddy, a designation that had initially terrified him and now filled him with inexplicable pride. She launched herself into his arms with the confidence of a child who had never doubted her welcome. We brought cookies, she announced. Mama made the good ones. The ones with chocolate chips that are actually chocolate chunks, Amanda clarified, setting a container on the coffee table. My contribution to the chaos. Savannah appeared from the kitchen, having finished her call, and Logan felt the same tightness in his chest that always came when she entered a room. Even after all this time, even after 18 months of waking up beside her, he sometimes couldn't believe this was his life. Perfect timing, Savannah said, kissing Logan softly before being mobbed by all 3 children demanding cookies. I just got off the phone with the Morrison family. They won. The custody case? Logan asked, pride evident in his voice. Primary custody to Dad. Plus the judge ordered family counseling for everyone. That little girl is going to grow up knowing her father loves her. As afternoon melted into evening, the house filled with the comfortable chaos of family life. Amanda stayed for dinner along with Brooklyn, who had appointed herself the boys' honorary big sister. They ate spaghetti and garlic bread around the dining table Logan had built himself, his first attempt at woodworking, which had resulted in a slightly wobbly but beloved piece of furniture that the children had immediately claimed for art projects and tea parties. "Daddy," Theo said as Logan carried him upstairs for bath time, "are you happy today?" It was their nightly ritual, Theo's way of checking on the emotional temperature of his world. "The happiest," Logan assured him. "Are you happy today?" "The most happiest," Theo confirmed with 3-year-old certainty. Later, after baths and teeth brushing and the reading of approximately 17 books, Logan and Savannah sat on their back porch swing, watching fireflies begin their nightly dance across the yard. The baby monitor crackled softly beside them, carrying the sound of the boys' sleepy whispers as they settled into their shared bedroom. "Amanda asked me something interesting today," Savannah said, curling up against Logan's side. "What's that?" "She asked if we ever thought about having more children." Logan felt his breath catch. They had talked about marriage, about merging their lives, about the logistics of blending business and family, but somehow, the possibility of expanding their family hadn't come up. "What did you tell her?" "That I'd have to talk to my husband." Savannah looked up at him, her green eyes soft in the porch light. "What do you think?" Logan thought about Theo's fearless enthusiasm and Levi's thoughtful questions. He thought about 3 a.m. feedings and sleepless nights, and the particular exhaustion that came with loving small people more than life itself. He thought about how empty his life had been before them. "I think," he said carefully, "that I never imagined wanting anything more than what we have. And I also think that maybe that's exactly why we should consider it." Savannah smiled, the same smile that had undone him in a Boston conference room what felt like a lifetime ago. "I love you, Logan Whitaker." "I love you too, Savannah Whitaker." The name still sounded new, wonderful, like a gift he got to unwrap every day. From inside the house came the sound of small feet on hardwood, followed by Levi's voice calling softly, "Mama? Daddy? I had a dream." Logan and Savannah exchanged a look, the wordless communication of parents who had learned to function as a team. "Coming, sweetheart," Savannah called back. As they walked inside to comfort their son, Logan caught sight of their reflection in the hallway mirror. A family, complete and imperfect and absolutely real. Savannah in her favorite jeans and one of his old button-down shirts. Logan in clothes that actually fit his life now, both of them with the particular exhaustion and contentment that came with loving children. 2 years ago, Logan Whitaker had been a man who controlled billion-dollar deals but couldn't control his own heart. Now he was a man who understood that the most important things in life couldn't be controlled at all. They could only be loved, nurtured, and chosen again and again, one day at a time. "Daddy Logan," Levi mumbled as Logan settled him back into his small bed. "Will you still be here when I wake up?" "Always," Logan promised. The same promise he'd made every night for 18 months. "I'll always be here." And for the first time in his life, Logan Whitaker meant it completely. As he turned off the bedroom light and headed back to where Savannah was waiting, Logan smiled at the thought that had become his daily prayer of gratitude. Sometimes the most important things find you when you finally stop running from them. Sometimes love really is that simple. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get to discover that the life you were afraid to want is exactly the life you were meant to live. Thank you for following this journey of love, fear, and second chances. Sometimes the greatest courage isn't in closing billion-dollar deals. It's in opening your heart to the possibility of unconditional love. What did this story teach you about taking risks for the people who matter most? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below, letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.